At the beginning of his ministry, Jesus went back to his hometown of Nazareth, and on the Sabbath he read these words from the scroll of Isaiah. "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of God's favor." It is a known fact that Jesus was a healer. The stories are many, and both believers and skeptics agree that Jesus not only preached and taught, but that he also healed the sick and made them well. The effect was twofold. People's lives were changed, and they instantly became living witnesses for Jesus, just because they were alive. Their presence was simultaneously a reason for hope and a problem to be solved. Their very existence begged the question, who is this man? One such healing, as recorded in the Gospel of John, was not requested. It was done in response to a question from his disciples. Seeing a blind man, they asked Jesus, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents?" Their assumption was that the sick, the lame, and the blind were being punished by God. Either they themselves were sinners, or the sins of their parents were now being laid upon them. The justification for that comes from the book of Exodus, where we read that the Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet, he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of their parents to the third and fourth generation. So in their time, it was not uncommon for them to see any sort of illness or handicap as some sort of punishment from God. And a child blind from birth, for instance, well, that was quite obviously the result of the parents' sin, not their own. So here, his disciples presented Jesus with a multiple choice question. Was it his sin or his parents' sin that caused God to take away his sight? And of course, Jesus chose neither. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus said. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. While I am in the world, he said, I am the light of the world. And having said that, Jesus healed the man using dirt and spit. I'm not sure the treatment is actually approved by the AMA, but it worked anyway. He sent the man off to wash his face in the pool and left. When the man did so, suddenly he could see. And what should he do now? Well, he went home. He wasn't really seeking any sort of notoriety or fame, but it was quickly thrust upon him by his neighbors, who recognized him as the blind man that used to sit by the temple. They in turn dragged him to the Pharisees, who questioned him. How did this happen? He put mud in my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Instead of being happy for him, maybe, the Pharisees focused on the fact that this healing had taken place on the Sabbath. So Jesus had broken the law, the one that said you cannot labor on Sabbath day. This man is not from God, they declared, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But you see, that created a problem for them, because how can a sinner perform such signs? Jesus was obviously a sinner because he violated the Sabbath, but he could not have healed this man unless God was with him. And if God was with him, well, then clearly Jesus was not a sinner. Unable to come to any sort of consensus, they finally asked the blind man, "What do you have to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." And the formerly blind man replied, "He is a prophet." Obviously. That didn't help. If Jesus was a prophet, then he also spoke and acted for God. And so he can't be a prophet if he breaks God's law. But if he is not a prophet, then how was this man healed? Faced again with the very same dilemma, they just threw the man out. Hearing about all this, Jesus went and found him and asked him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" That was a loaded question in that time. laden with messianic hopes and expectation. "Who is he, sir?" the man asked very diplomatically. "Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Because, of course, he'd never seen his face, but he had already experienced his grace. No doubt, Jesus smiled and then said to him, "You have seen him now. He is the one speaking with you." "Lord, I believe," the man replied. Amazing grace. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. He had never asked Jesus to heal him, but Jesus did. And that got him into trouble. Why? Because with his new eyes, he could now see what the Pharisees could not, that Jesus was more than a healer and more than a prophet. He was actually the very presence of God in the world. "For judgment I have come into this world," Jesus said, "so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Ironic, isn't it? A blind man could now see more clearly than those who were highly educated and in places of power. They all got it wrong. If they had seen the light, then the darkness within them would have been dispersed. As it was, what they thought to be true was actually false, and what none of them ever considered was that there had to be a third choice if the first two are wrong. And that truth was that this man is the light of the world, just as he said he was. Even if we only see Jesus as a prophet, then we should still listen to him and follow his teachings. But if Jesus is the light of the world, then we have to learn how to walk in the light. If we don't, then we're going to be stumbling about in the dark for our whole life, like a blind man, but far worse. We will be spiritually blind. If we believe and choose to walk in the light, it will change our life and our worldview. Be warned, however, that those who prefer to live in the dark often feel threatened when someone turns on the light. For those of you who have actually experienced his grace, however, the only real choice is to believe and to trust the one who has loved you and redeemed you and opened your eyes. And this you can do no matter what your circumstance may be. When she was only 2 years old, Helen Keller became deaf and blind. Unable to see or hear, her prospects in life looked bleak. You know the rest of the story, perhaps, of how a remarkable teacher found a way to communicate with her, and how this in turn enabled her to achieve incredible things later on in her life. She graduated with honors from Radcliffe College in 1904. She became a tireless advocate for the blind and the deaf. She traveled globally as a lecturer and a humanitarian, and she co-founded the ACLU, supporting the cause of racial justice as well. In many ways, it can truly be said that she saw and experienced this world far better than those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, but never use either of them to understand or to care. She also wrote a book entitled My Religion. In it, she made it clear that it was really her faith, not her disabilities, that compelled her to become an advocate for justice, peace, and human dignity. Helen Keller's faith was publicly respected, but privately puzzling to many people, because how could she possibly believe in God when life had handed her such hardship? Eventually, however, many Americans came to see her faith as just part of her moral authority. They admired her devotion to God, even if they didn't share her theology. All the good she did came from her ability to live by faith and love other people, even though she could not ever see them with her eyes. This is what walking in the light looks like. True faith is not a fruit of security, she wrote. It is the ability to blend mortal fragility with the inner strength of the Spirit. When I think of the suffering and famine and the continued slaughter of men, my spirit bleeds. But the thought comes to me that like the little deaf, dumb, and blind child I once was, mankind is growing out of the darkness of ignorance and hate and into the light of a brighter day. About this, I hope she is right. And this much I know for sure, that Jesus is the brightest star that this world has ever known, and his light is still shining in our darkness today. So whatever happened to the blind man that Jesus healed, the only clue we have to that is that his story continued to be told and shared, and still is told today. That is because this was not just a medical miracle, but also a miracle of faith. Being blind and helpless, this man could never hope to heal himself, and neither do we. But Jesus touched him. And then later, when he was able to look at the face of his Savior, he said, "Lord, I believe." In other words, the most important part of this story was not the miracle. It was his confession of faith before the faithless. And with or without his eyes, that alone was proof that he was no longer blind anymore. Hallelujah. Be safe, and God bless you.